All right, everybody. Welcome to the last presentation of the evening, or workshop, we should say. Last but not least, definitely. Today, I'd like to welcome Dalia from Crete for her work on constructively aligning lesson design and assessment in order to meet inclusive education learning outcomes. Please wish her a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Good news is that it's the last session. And I have even better news to share with you. It's going to be a workshop. So we're going to be working in groups. And before we start, I would like you to know that you'll have to have your devices with you. But for now, you can leave them where they are, because I would like to do something so that we can mingle. But before we do that, I want you to get ready mentally for this. So would you like to get up, please? Thank you. Thank you for doing that. I thought I would fail at the very first task. I thought, what happens if nobody gets up? That's very nice. Thank you very much. And would you like to stretch a little bit? Yeah, and feel very, very happy that this is the last session and that we're going to go out after a while, right? Okay, so if you're happy, this is the last session and we are almost finishing the day. Would you like to clap your hands really, really loud? What a group, what a group. Excellent. Now I'm going to come around and I'm going to give you some colors. The only rule is you can choose your color, but then you can't choose the same color as the person next to you. Please don't sit down. And if you need your device, you'll have to take it with you, because we might have to have. So the only rule is you can't have the same color as the person next to you. I would like, did I give you one? Yes, I did. Next, I would like the green team to be over here. The yellow team will be over there. The red one will be over there. And the orange one will be over here. You got one. Okay. Cheers. I'll give you the colors in a minute as well. So it's green, yellow, red, orange. You don't want to move. You want to stay where you are. Very clever move. I'm just kidding. Okay, now we're almost ready. Let's ask the green team to be getting around over here, those 3 rows. Just make sure you sit close enough so that we can hear people talking. Green team is here, yellow team is there, red one is there, and orange team is there. Yes, please take your devices with you. Great, thank you very much. I will just start by introducing the topic, which is constructively aligning lesson design and assessment to meet inclusive education learning outcomes. Most of you, I know you're familiar with constructive alignment, BIGS, but I will give some introduction as well. There is the QR code for the assessment if you want, but you can find it on the side of your desks as well. I just want to say that this workshop is not presented for the first time. It's part of another project that we have at the University of Crete, which is called Coalition, and its actual and the actual acronym comes from Coaching Academics as Learners in Inclusive Optimal Networks. Now, it sounds very fancy, but the message is very, very simple. It's nothing that you haven't heard of before. And that's why I need you to help out when you work in groups, because in my mind, I'm asking experts to work together so that some of these ideas and suggestions, become more prominent for everybody. So what we're going to do today, we're going to be talking about how perceptions of teaching and learning have changed in the last 200 years. Have they really changed? The way we present stuff, the way we teach, the way people learn. What kind of learning do we aspire to have in higher education? Especially when we put into this equation the terms like inclusion and equity that we have all talked about in the last 2 days. And how do we constructively align our lessons or syllabus with all these ideas? so that it actually takes place and it's not just on paper. How do we need to create communities of practice within this scheme that I just described? So inclusion levels in higher education, many different layers. Today, I'm only going to talk about what academics can do. And perhaps if we have management people here, they are more than welcome to take part and contribute. If we have students, I think there are a couple of them here as well. Yes, please speak out and say, share your thoughts. The three key principles that we all talked about in the last 2 days is equity, diversity, and inclusion. But I just, on the right-hand side, I have a message that I want you to know before we talk about constructive alignment and student-centered syllabus. So if we talk about these things, we can't ignore the fact that we need to allow for systems and learning environments that diverse students' voices can be heard. How many of you do this, make this happen in a lecture theatre of 200 people? How feasible is such a thing? Yes, Ines. Yeah, very good. How many of you, okay, let's do that. How many of you actually, please raise your hands if you actually can do this, allow diverse student voices to be heard in a lecture theatre of 200 people. And you do it strategically, you do it on purpose, and you know how to do it. And you don't feel like, oh, 200 people, that's not possible. So we have 2 people in the room, look around you, 2 people. I'm just making it even worse for you two now, guys. Everybody will be asking you in a minute why, how, you know. How many people give equal opportunities for all students to engage in a 200 student amphitheater, you know, or a lecture theater with 200 students? Ines is about to raise her hand again. Okay, now Stelios has given up already. Oh, no, you, okay. To engage, and how many of you use something during your lessons that allow a system, I mean, or a routine or a task? When I say something, that's what I mean, that allows for assessment for learning, not just assessing how much they know, but assessment for learning, meaning do your students end up knowing what they know, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are? Do they know where they're standing, if they are on the right track, if they need to do something to change? This is another thing that I want to show you, and then you can talk about in your groups about how we can change some student-centered core concepts into inclusive student-centered core principles. I'll explain in a minute. So when we talk about inclusion, we need to make sure we create an environment where students from different backgrounds learn from each other. Different needs, different backgrounds. We have to create an environment where learners collaborate successfully, knowing they're different and knowing that not everybody can do the same thing. Not everybody is good at the same thing. We need to create an environment that does not address the needs of people that have the label of being disabled, for example, or having a learning difficulty. We're looking about a very holistic framework where we do something in advance in order to address possible problems that may come up and may benefit a wider population. And the last thing I have here is basically to include everybody despite the cultural, social, economical background as well. If we take Hawkins' quotation and we just I just want to share this quotation with you, because the last sentence here, it says that inclusive education basically embraces a view of the individual and the individual difference as the source of diversity that can enrich the lives and the learning of everybody else. So this is something that today we're going to think about how we can do it. So in your groups, you're going to come up with, in a minute, with ideas of how we can actually implement this kind of thing. In one of my latest publications, I have just basically added that inclusive education, inclusive student-centered pedagogies are defined as the proactive and the intentional teaching and learning activities that we design in order to allow for people to learn and succeed in a very diverse environment. And I just want you to look at those three words: student engagement, self-awareness, self-regulation, and hopefully autonomy and success. Now, in my title, I have big constructive alignment there. Just for those of you that don't know what it is, basically, it is about having certain learning outcomes in mind and trying to design assessment tasks that measure whether these expected outcomes we all have as teachers actually are real or not, basically. And then design the learning activities that can make this happen, and then provide the materials and resources that help students to achieve learning. If we take into account Bloom's taxonomy and Solo and the updated version of Bloom's taxonomy, we can see that we have to design tasks that are expected to be developing, let's say, fostering higher cognitive levels. And we shouldn't really, on this day and age, expect students just to know things and understand things. But based on this knowledge and understanding, we should allow them to hone skills, different skills, like, for example, analytical skills, critical thinking skills, creative skills, and so on. So the higher we go, the better. This is important. Understanding and knowledge is important, but it's very basic. And even for employability purposes, it's not good enough nowadays, you know. So we have to adapt. We have to adapt what we do in our lectures, because what we actually ask our students to do is what they actually learn based on this. So even the definition of inclusion has changed. In the last 30 years, most of you must know that it was mostly, the conversation was mostly about access. And we talked a lot about access, you know, open access even still is a big thing. But then we talk about engagement, equal opportunities for engagement for everybody. And now we talked about opportunities for self-regulation, progress, and success. So if we look at these two pictures, which one would you say takes place in a lecture theatre of 200 people? Yes, both of them do actually take place in a lecture theatre of 200 people. It's just that on the one on the right-hand side, you just see one group of students working together, and it doesn't actually remind you of a typical lecture theatre and what we are all used to, and we are very happy to recreate because we are accustomed to it, not because it's the best thing to do, right? Okay. And before you are divided in your groups and you to have this discussion that I want you to have, I'm not going to talk about educational theories, but this is something that we all have, even if we don't know the official name of an educational theory, even if we don't know what behaviorism is, or cognitivism, constructivism, and adult learning theory. we all choose as teachers to do certain things because deep down we adopt one of those things or a mixture of those things, right? So every choice we make as a teacher is basically, there's something like this underlying, determining everything we do, whether we know it or not. So, but because we don't have time for this, I'm not going to talk about this, but I want you to work on this. So this is your first task in your groups. I have a table from Bloomberg, very recent table on the differences between student-centered learning and teacher-centered learning. Teacher-centered learning, as you all know, is what we find typically happening in a big lecture theatre with 200 people, right? And you can see on the first, the column in the middle, that basically when it comes to student roles, students are expected to have a passive kind of role. Yeah, they don't do, they're not expected to do many things. Faculty role is that of the, how can I say, the person who talks and disseminates information. Exactly. The responsibility for learning is something that lies on the instructor. Mostly, the instructor feels like they're responsible for their students' learning. And the issue of instructor control is one of, in the literature, is something that can become an impediment. And it's only recently that researchers have realized that people that are using teacher-centered ways of presenting information, they feel like they have to control everything. And then higher order cognitive skills, when it comes to that, memorization is the key. I told you something today. In 3 months' time, you can come, write the paper, and tell me exactly what I said. And if you do that, well done, you're brilliant. You know, you deserve to pass. But if you, but I don't test. If I do this kind of thing, I don't test anything else. My students are not measured. Their learning is not measured based on their analytical skills. It's not based on their creativity. It's just based on memory. And I'll go to the last one. The last one, it's based on summative exams, which is final exams. Yeah. As we said earlier on, whereas in student-centered learning, we have formative assessment or assessment for learning, where every little encounter we have with our students is designed on purpose in order to achieve a certain learning outcome, whatever that might be, because from context to context, from person to person, from level to level, this is different. This is never the same. And we cannot say today to discuss how we can align all learning outcomes across the curriculum. This would be impossible. It might be at least 30 PhDs together, right? Okay, so let's keep that in mind and in your groups. Now that we talked about inclusion and equity and diversity and how we can implement a system that allows these things to happen, not to say flourish, but just say happen, right? I want you to think of how the column on the right-hand side can be adapted to become even better, because this doesn't take inclusion into account. And I'll give you one example. It says here about engagement, for example. It says active engagement in design social processing of content, right? It says social processing, but that could mean that I can ask a question and when I'm giving a lecture, and I can get 3 people to answer. Tick, I've done it. Is it inclusive? Did everybody answer? Did everybody get engaged? No, some people at the back will be happily using their laptops, you know, feeling completely detached with what I'm saying today, or anybody who's been giving a lecture for that matter, right? So I want you to reconsider this and see how we can change that, how we can adapt it, in order to create more inclusive learning environments in a lecture theatre with 200 people. And this is your first task. You have 8 minutes to do that in your groups. I would like you to, I know there's so many things to talk about. I would like to have your attention now, and please choose a spokesperson. Yeah, I will. Would you like to go to this group, and who would like to be the spokesperson? You have, Martin, you have only 1 minute. 1 minute.
Starting now?
Can you take the time, please? And then
Okay.
pretend to be the alarm and go beep, 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 when the time is, yeah, that's it. Yeah. Time starts now.
Now, okay. We found a method like think, pair, share, or 1, 2, 3, all,
Excellent.
as a
Think, pair,
possibility to engage everyone. Still, not everyone can be heard. And if we want to solve that, and by moving it to a technology supported path like Mentimeter or any other tool, there still is another point of exclusion, because not everyone has the device, not everyone can afford it.
Yeah.
So you have to make a decision on which part you want to support in that session, but it's a better way than not.
I told you we have a group of experts. You know, I've got already one group of experts. I'm already convinced. Thank you so much for this. And you were
was in time.
well. Wow.
47 seconds.
And here their spokesperson. We have only 1 minute.
Yeah.
Kai will be the alarm in a minute. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we were also talking about the Mentimeter, but we were also discussing the flexibility of classrooms to have flexible classrooms. You can subdivide the class into smaller groups. We also talked about even if we divide the students into smaller groups, not everyone will speak. In a group of 7, 8 people, you can use a deck of playing cards. So you can have tokens. So everyone has to speak a number of times and maximum number of times and so on. So did I forget something?
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, to provide material in the beginning to study and have a discussion instead of a lecture.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a great idea. Thank you so much. 2 seconds before the time is up. Amazing. Shall we go to this group or that group over there, and then we end up with it? Yes, that's it.
Okay, now I have to beat Mika.
Yeah, you can start earlier than the alarm. Yeah, start just.
I'm just gonna give you points. Not everybody has to be participate. It doesn't mean that they are not engaging. We as teachers are just we need to provide a space for everybody to be able to participate if that is their wish.
Online or face to face?
Yes. We were suggesting work in pairs. We were also talking about online presentations, so that we can include many different students with many different disabilities. And what else? Turtle. And that's it. And a really important point to think about is the language of instruction as well, and how that can be inclusive or exclusive towards students.
Very good point. Very good point. Amazing. And this group?
Well, thank you. Well, we thought that the best ways to separate the 200 students that we have into groups, let's say that there could be 20 groups, and assign a specific set of the exercise, I mean, of the topic. So just separate the topic in different subtopics and assign them with the different topic that
sounds like jigsaw. The
Yes,
jigsaw method. That's a very
but they
good
will have
idea.
something
Yeah.
different, so they will work on
Yeah.
that. So they will collaborate and work on different things and collaborate. And well, actually, they could do restitution of themselves, and so they can work on the groups, and then they could debate on the issues, and they could exchange the different ideas they have, maybe on the different issues or
Yeah.
sub issues which are related. And there will be in discussion in the group and among the different groups. That's it.
Hi, you are an excellent alarm alarm clock. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Let me just show you two slides about what communication and teaching used to be like 200 years ago. 1960, in the 1960s, Berlot talked about the process of your communication, saying how important it is to be aware that teachers are transmitters and we need to be aware of what channel of communication we use, and students are the recipients who decode everything we say, right? Okay, this should change to that, because now we want to talk about this interface between content, instructors, peers, and of course, channels of communication, means of achieving the end and the learning outcome that we want to achieve. So the whole system that we use and create, and we are responsible for creating that system, has to change in order to include everybody. This is your next task, and your next task will be talking about learning barriers. Because some people tell me when I give this workshop, the first thing they say is that we can't possibly do that because there's so many barriers. And how do I know, if I have 200 people in my lecture theatre, how do I know about their individual needs? There's no way I can address every single person's needs and basically provide need-based teaching or learnings. And they're right. But the whole idea here is not to try to wait until you get the label and, you know, and the stigma that comes with it, but do something before so that you don't have to know. And sometimes they don't even have to come to you and say, do you know what? I can't see very well, and you need, or I'm colorblind, you need to change red and green, and in your slides doesn't help me. You know, you need to be aware of possibilities and cater for those situations where you can do something about it. And if something else happens that makes you aware of something else good, then you can take action. So what I would like you to do is to be aware that there are not just physical barriers. People are not just, they don't just have disabilities or but physical disabilities, but there are also cultural barriers. And by cultural barrier, I mean perhaps the actual culture, like ethnicity or race or religion, or other things like sexuality, or anything that we identify with. Or it could be discourse community barriers, in the sense that you are the expert, you use the language that you use to communicate um, your expertise, but people that are there not ready yet, they're not part of this discourse community. What do you do to make them feel welcome and make them feel like, oh, I can understand this, I can relate to this, and I want to find out more, instead of feeling, oh my God, I don't know what this guy is talking about. They're using so much jargon. So this is another thing that we need to be aware of. Cognitive barriers. You obviously are aware of cognitive barriers. If your students are not up to par with what you're presenting, not the right level, some kind of information is missing, something is misunderstood and need to be clarified, what do you do to be aware of this? Do you do anything, or do you take into account that they all know everything and you just carry on and moving on to the next lecture? This is another thing that we may be doing. So in your groups, this is group 1, this is group 2. group 3, group 4, I would like you to go to these Google Docs and so it's group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. And I would like you to do this. Identify one problem in each category, or one category if the time is not enough, because I understand you might not have enough time for this. It's a 6-minute task. So I want you to identify one problem and suggest one solution. Okay, one problem, one solution. There are many problems in each category, but please don't try to create a list. Just focus on one problem and provide one solution. These are Google Docs. You'll have access to it if you just use your mobile phone or your laptop. You will be able to access the link, and you will all be able to write things down if you want. But at the end of the day, only the spokesperson, a different spokesperson this time, will be speaking to share what you have discussed in your groups. Time starts now. This is discussion time in your groups for 6 minutes. You can write on the doc. You're all editors, so if you just type, it will show up. Yeah, just one. Oh, anybody can write, but at the end of the day, I'll ask you to just give me one idea. So you need to talk first before you write anything down. All problems are small problems, actually, if you just look at one of them every time. Yeah, you're right. Forty-seven. You have 1 minute left. One minute left. You're done. Okay. Are we done in this group as well? Shall we move on? Kai, would you like to be the timer again? Okay, you can start from a different group this time. Perhaps start with these guys over there. In about 30 seconds. Can we now stop the discussion and group work and come back to the plenary session? All right, I would like to ask a different person in this group to be the spokesperson. And again, Kai will be your timer and he will explode this time if you go over time.
Social and cultural
We
barriers.
can't hear you.
Social and cultural barriers is the one we were addressing, and the suggestion is to follow what was proposed in the paramedics presentation, the safe space, open questions. Anything else we mentioned? Just creating a safe space, yeah, with open questions and a positive environment.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And this group here, Kai. Thank you.
Thanks, Guy. Okay. So I think we began in the physical environment where we were talking about the learning space and how the learning space is designed to a certain extent, but you get caught, you know, with the architecture, it's sometimes those problems can't be solved. But we were saying then, basically, in terms of our learning materials, we can start from the starting point where we can make them accessible in the first place. So, for example, the student you mentioned with the color blindness, if we use accessible templates for our maybe our PowerPoints or our Google Docs, that student doesn't need to put up their hand and say, well, I'm colorblind. Or etc. Or if we design our assessments so that if we have an hour-long exam, the exam should be completed in 50 minutes as opposed to an hour, which means that student that has a disability does not have to get 10 minutes extra and they're the person that's sitting in the hall. So we're designing for everybody, really. So we're universal design for learning.
Very good point. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Kai is very happy as well. You didn't have to explode.
Thank you. We choose to address the fact that all students don't have the same scientific background.
Oh yeah.
And when they have to solve problem, it might be an issue. So we would like to make them work in group once again. But before that, the preliminary step will be to assess the student to identify individually their scientific background and then organize the group according to the assessment. Once the group are formed, the student could cooperate to solve the problem, and the teacher could also be available as a resource person to help the different group all along the process.
Very good. Thank you. Yep.
We looked at physical barrier of being left-handed.
Ah, very good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose we were in the context of a biolab or a computer lab where equipment tends to be set up for right-handed people. So perhaps some stations set up for to accommodate left-handers. So
Very good point. Very good.
will I
point.
sing or something
Thank
to
you so
fill up
much.
the times?
Thank you so much. Thank you. Let me just sum it all up and just suggest a few more things very quickly because we have about 6 minutes left. 7? Yeah. So one task that we usually do at the University of Crete is use slides like that with identity values and identity cards on first lessons. So we tell people that they need to become, they need to share with other people in the group which identity they value more in their lives, because they might be mothers, they might be, from a certain race, they might be gender related, it might be language related. So they choose which one that creates it generates a discussion within a group, allows people to get to know each other. And if you have connections and you feel like you've shared and you've exposed yourself a little bit, that kind of thing creates communities. And we build upon that to say then to them that they are responsible for helping everybody else in the community to grow. And after they have exposed themselves, we play this kind of mind trick, and it works because people already are attached to this idea of responsibility. So if somebody has some kind of trouble and something doesn't work, they don't laugh, which is another thing that might have happened in previous years, when things like that were not addressed. I will sum up a few things because I think I heard some of them whilst you were talking. It is important to understand in inclusive, student-centered classrooms. It is important to understand that we are not the only source of information anymore. In the past, 200 years ago, perhaps, but not anymore. We are not the only source of information. Let's just make the most of it. Use multiple resources that allow people to access information in different ways, different modes, and also make sure they're open access, take responsibility for active engagement, for people that are not normally seen, people that are usually invisible for some reason. Because sometimes trying to be politically correct, we intentionally don't touch or don't go near what's not easy for us to address. So perhaps we should not do that anymore. With good intentions, we can all make this happen. Provide feedback and assessment for learning. Make sure when you design tasks or exams, you allow them to know what it is they do well and what it is that they need to work on. This is something that doesn't traditionally happen in universities because we all have final exams. And I don't mean you, I'm sure you don't do that, you've never done that. But we all love, final exams where we just give the mark, just some general feedback that doesn't mean anything if we do that. And that doesn't help anybody to grow. Okay, you mentioned think, pair, share activities where people are actually given articulation opportunities, ways to express themselves, ways to understand whether they are on the right track, whether they've understood. You can use different interactive tools, like, for example, all these platforms that I have here. You can use concept maps if you want to keep them engaged and include them in your assessment. For example, if I give a lecture for about an hour, all I can do is ask my students to create concept maps or share on a platform their maps and give them something towards it because they've done some work and they should be accounted for. This is a mistake many people make as well. Make video lectures available if you can, because some people work and they might not be able to attend your class, but they might be able to watch that video, do the tasks. If you provide alternatives for tasks and engagement opportunities, they will be able to succeed even if they have to work late hours when you are not actually teaching. And provide reading lists, comprehensive reading lists, not just the official book that they will be, tested on. Just make sure you give them enough information so that they don't need you. And when you make yourself completely redundant, then you will be very inclusive in your way of teaching. This is just an example of one platform that we use in the University of Crete, where we basically, this is Socrates, just an example of things professors do in order to make sure people follow. So you teach something at the end of the lesson, you might ask some questions, they can see where the problem lies. The names are not shown. They may as well use nicknames to make even, sure that nobody actually knows what happens. And they can address straight away what the problem might be without labeling again. The commitment to inclusion begins with each of us. And this is something that we have to realize, because we tend to do something else which doesn't help. And I'm sure you don't do that either. I'm talking about some other people, you don't know them. How many times do you see students' poor performance and say that, oh, this is due to poor management, oh, this is just a poor student, they are unable to succeed? How many of you think that it's the way you designed the assessment method? How many of you take responsibility for what your own choice, because it's a choice, what you choose to do at the end of the semester, it is really up to you. Yes, we all know that final exams, summative assessment is the norm, let's say, but is the norm inclusive? Is it the best thing to do? And do we just do it because it's our comfort zone? What else can we do? And I'm sure you all hate me. You're probably thinking, I've got enough things to do. I don't want you to give me all these fancy ideas and then make me work even harder than I already work. But it's true. And the point that we're all missing perhaps is that whatever assessment we use, to some point, something will not be fair for some people. Fairness shouldn't be the only criterion, and objectivity, because whatever assessment we use, even if we use multiple choice, which is some people's favorite, again, there is subjectivity and error in it. I have a suggestion to make before I close. And this suggestion is something to replace midterm exams, at least. If we can't not go for final exams, and we love them so much, at least we can go for this model. A 3-stage midterm exam goes like this. You have a 3-hour session. In the first hour, students take individual tests, and they come and submit their papers on their own, like a normal exam. In the second hour, students have to be working in groups with only one condition, that all the answers that they provide on the same paper they took as individuals earlier on, they have to be unanimously agreed. Everybody needs to agree in the group that this is indeed the best answer. That generates discussion. If they have any misconceptions, they come up, they correct each other, they argue, they come to the professor and they ask questions, and then you have to explain. It is a really nice process. And in the third hour, basically what you need to do is just choose random papers from groups or individuals. Make sure it's random, though, so that, again, it doesn't stigmatize anybody. It doesn't make them feel like you are just doing them to make them feel embarrassed. And provide feedback on these actual answers, because they can see you make visible your teaching philosophy, what you prioritize, what they need to focus. Everything becomes clearer for them, and they have no excuse not to do something to align their own learning in order to succeed. If I have to choose 3 words, what time is it? Am I out of time? Do I have a minute? 3 minutes. Okay. If I have to use some keywords to sum up the whole thing, I would say give people a choice whenever you can. Even if it is access opportunities, engagement opportunities, or assessment opportunities. then I would say there are many things listed here for choice. So I don't want to go through them because, but give people feedback is the other thing that I want to address here, because this is something that is often neglected at our universities. And this is I will close with this. This is my final slide. This is a publication, a research paper on the need to use some kind of micro credentials or use accreditation systems to acknowledge good teaching, because this is what is really missing behind everything we do. Because you know, and I know, that unless we get promoted based on good teaching, we get hired based on good teaching, or any kind of, you know, acknowledgement based on good teaching and not just research outputs, you know, whatever we produce research wise, it's not going to help us change. We don't have the drive. We don't have the motivation. This is WP5 work package in Ingenium. And I'm a coordinator for the University of Crete. Stelios, though, will be working on this. So it's important to start thinking about these things seriously, because unless there is a motive, there is an incentive, nothing will happen. We will be using EU money to talk about these amazing ideas, and nothing will be implemented in the next few years. So let's make sure this doesn't happen. Thank you very much for listening to me.